everyone. Welcome to Slancha's Sustainability. My name's Erin. I'm the sustainability strategist and advisor with ENSO. Very excited to have a conversation with you all today.
My name's Donal, founder of Enso, and again, really excited to be here. We've got a huge topic to talk about today. We're going to look at COP, arguably one of the world's leading and most recognized global conferences on sustainability. We talk about it a lot. Every year we see it coming around, it's in the news, it's in the papers. I still think there's a lot of confusion out there. And Erin, I know you follow it really closely from a personal level and as part of our research through Enso. And maybe you can dispel some of the myths, get people up to pace on what it is, because it's coming back around really soon.
We're going to go back to COP basics. So, first things first, COP stands for Conference of the Parties, and it actually refers to multiple different conferences throughout the years. But usually, when someone says COP, they are referring to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC. It is the main meeting where the UNFCCC and all of the countries that are involved make their decisions for the year. So it does happen yearly, and it's an opportunity for all of the countries that have signed on to participate to negotiate new measures and to review their progress on past years' agreements and binding targets. So I will probably be saying COP throughout, but it's kind of fun to also know that there are two other important environmental COPs happening this year. We have the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So, other really interesting things going on, but probably 95 to 99% of the time someone says COP, they are talking about the UNFCCC, the Climate Change Convention.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll be
Um,
calling it COP, and that's fine. But it's just interesting that, yeah, there's a couple different other ones as well.
Great. And then you mentioned the countries that have signed up to it. Does every country sign up to it, or how does that work?
The vast majority, so I think it's 190, 189, 190 of the countries that are part of the United Nations are also signed on to the UNFCCC.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
it's pretty much everyone.
Great.
Yeah, but also through the COP, civil service organizations come in, NGOs, businesses, things like that. But the actual parties in the Conference of the Parties are those countries that are signed on. I actually think the EU is signed on as its own party as well. So
Ah,
there'll be
okay.
someone there representing Ireland, but then there will also be someone there representing the European Union, which is really interesting because obviously those things are inextricably linked,
Mm-hmm.
but there are different resources,
Yeah.
different politics at play. So it's very interesting that both of those will be represented at the COP this year. COP really does just focus on the climate change aspect of sustainability, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. When they
Yeah.
say climate change, it breaks down into so many different themes that it does end up touching kind of every aspect of sustainability anyway. So it's really
Okay.
interesting.
A lot of overlap. And with so many different countries there and groups, what has actually been achieved?
Great question. So, usually, when a COP ends, a binding agreement is released to the public. So, some examples of these past achievements, I'm going to go in chronological order and then I'll go a little bit more in depth about what happened last year.
Yep.
So, the first absolute and legally binding agreement on greenhouse gas emissions was brought together at a COP. It's called the Kyoto Protocol. However, for that one, only 37 industrialized countries committed themselves to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 5.2% below 1990 levels between 2008 and 2012. So it was really focused on developed countries in the global north. It left developing countries out of it, like didn't give them any requirements, even if they were high emitters, because like they were working to develop. So this was really looking at industrialized kind of developed countries in the global
Mhm.
north. Then
Okay.
we have, which is probably the most famous of the COP decisions, the Paris Agreement of 2015. This
Yes.
was
You hear this in
a
the media a lot.
Yeah, this was a huge deal. This was like a landmark climate decision. This was when we had that target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The actual target in the Paris Agreement is 2 degrees Celsius or less, with doing as much as we can to keep it to 1.5 degrees Celsius or less. So this one was a huge deal. This was when We started looking at nationally determined contributions, which I will talk about a bit throughout as well. This was basically voluntary plans that countries put into place, and voluntary targets that they put into
Okay.
place. One of the issues with that was that there was no weight behind it. There was no administrative power to make countries do these or to make sure that they were strong enough. Right now, they were just, all right, here's what we're going to try to do. Here's how we're going to try to do it. Another important action that happened at COP, that ties into big things that will be talked about probably this year and were definitely talked about last year. In 2009 in Copenhagen, industrialized developed countries made a commitment to donate or to give 100 billion US dollars a year in support of climate action, particularly in the most vulnerable regions, which are just so happen to usually be the places that didn't actually contribute that much to climate change, but will be feeling the worst effects. We have never, since 2009, we've never hit that 100 billion a year,
Okay.
but we're getting closer and closer. And the reason I want to bring that up is because one of the most landmark things that came out of last year's COP was the losses and damages fund. So this had already been agreed on the year before, but now we've agreed to fund and operationalize it. It's currently housed within the World Bank, and losses and damages fund takes that 100 billion a year for climate action and specifically puts it under the heading of how are we going to pay for the damages that come with these crazy storms that we're getting because
Yeah.
of climate change, or the droughts, or other infrastructure damage, or loss of life and property and access and medical care and all of those things, particularly again in those vulnerable regions. So that was something that was really exciting to me that came out of last year. However, we're still waiting for it to fully be operationalized. And the fact that it's currently situated in the World Bank, there's a little bit of a debate on whether it should be there, and they're looking to move it somewhere else. So it's slowly but surely that's happening, but it is exciting. Last year was also the first global stock take, which is when we looked at those nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, that I mentioned with the Paris Agreement. We looked at them to see how much progress we're making. Not surprising at all to anyone involved. We do need more action. We're behind on those goals. Those goals need to be amended.
Yeah.
But to end it on a positive note, last year we did see the words fossil fuels in the final agreement for the first time.
Okay.
It did say transitioning away from fossil fuels. A lot of activists aren't super happy with this because they wanted it to be phased out,
Hmm.
rather than transition away. But what I do like about it is that it's transitioning away from fossil fuels and energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner. I think those last three words, particularly just and equitable, are really,
Yeah.
really key.
Because I remember a lot of maybe fuss is the wrong word, but a lot of talk about where it was last year. So where
Yeah,
are we?
so
What location are we this year?
there's been some similar talks this year, and I'll explain why. COP29, so that's this year, it's being held in Baku, Azerbaijan from the 11th to the 24th of November. So there are a couple reasons. There's a little bit of skepticism about the location again, and to put it lightly.
Yeah.
So first, Azerbaijan itself, last year, oil and gas accounted for 92.5% of their export revenue. So huge percentage.
Wow.
And they reportedly have plans to expand that industry. On top of that, the president of COP, so every year we have COP, there is a president who is a representative of the host country who kind of
Okay.
presides over the proceedings and gives like an opening speech and helps set the priorities and things like that. So the president of COP this year is Mukhtar Babayev, who is currently Azerbaijan's Minister for Ecology and Natural Resources. The reason people are a bit skeptical about him is he is an oil industry veteran.
Okay. Yeah. So when you talk about natural resources, you're looking at oil.
Yeah, we're looking at oil and gas,
Yeah.
but he has set out, so there's a couple reasons that we do want to give kind of the benefit of the doubt and hope that this does go well, both based on his actions and Azerbaijan's actions. So first, He has set out his goals as building bridges between the diverging north and south and to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. I think that north south collaboration is key. So I was
It
happy to see
is.
that.
Yeah, you can't
Um,
polarize these things, and I think
e-
you do need to
exactly.
really work together.
Yeah, but then he's also stated the intentions of Azerbaijan as a country to turn the corner on their economy to more green directions, which goes a little bit against the reported plan to extend their fossil fuel industry. But you know what? Maybe that isn't happening. We'll have to see. This is backed up by the country joining the Global Methane Pledge, which is a goal of methane producing countries to kind of collectively reduce global methane emissions by 30% by 2030 from 2020 levels.
Okay.
And they've also invested in a major solar project with BP. Interesting that it's with BP. I actually didn't really know that they were doing big solar projects, at least big enough for like a country doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but that's almost a whole different conversation. But there are some actions to back up that potential shift in a greener direction. So I'm gonna go in with a little bit of benefit of the doubt on that. And yeah, a little bit of hope that it could be really interesting. You mentioned the COP presidency. They are in charge of setting kind of theme days and priorities for different aspects of COP. And I do just want to go through presently what we expect some of the key themes to be at COP based on the identified days where they're looking at different aspects and different aspects of sustainability. So this is where I think a lot of that holistic sustainability idea comes in as well. And then using that to kind of extrapolate, all right, what do we think we might see in this binding agreement? There are multiple theme days and just some examples of these key challenges and considerations for climate change that they'll be focusing on are finance, investment, and trade. We've got food, agriculture, and water. We've got nature and biodiversity, indigenous people, gender equality, oceans and coastal zones, children and youth, science, tech, and innovation, and many more. If you want to look a bit deeper into those individual theme days, I highly recommend checking out the COP29 website. The host country every year puts together a website going through kind of what are we going to be doing day by day? What are the different plenaries that are on? In the background of all of these theme days, all of the talks and the great panels and discussions that are happening, the delegates from the parties that we talked about in the beginning are in the background negotiating the agreement that will be presented at the end of the conference.
Okay, so as they're going through each team, yeah, they're actually talking about what they want to put forward at the end of the conference.
In theory, so the themes more connect to events that are going on that day. So,
Yeah.
for example, with the food, water, and agriculture section, the FAO, like the Food and Agriculture Organization, is likely going to be part of that and doing presentations and panel discussions and different roundtables and things like that. The delegates themselves may or may not, probably likely will not be at those events because they are behind closed doors
Okay.
negotiating.
Okay.
So they could be talking about food and agriculture on the theme day, but they might not be. Which is why, in terms of the actual agreement itself, we are predicting a couple of these things that they'll be talking about. So, climate finance is huge. So, looking at that loss and damages fund and how to
Hmm.
operationalize it and how to potentially update that 100 billion US dollar per year commitment because that does expire in 2025. So we
Okay.
want to update that. We also
Yeah.
want to look at updating those nationally determined contributions, those NDCs that we discussed connected to the Paris Agreement because they need to be more ambitious. We need to have a little bit more weight behind them to get more information about how people are doing it and making sure they're doing it, particularly in terms of the high emitters like the United States. We're also seeing more and more discussion about aligning biodiversity and climate. So that's something that could come through in this final agreement. Finally, we need to agree on the specifics on the global goal on adaptation. So, the global goal on adaptation is all about enhancing the world's adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing vulnerability to climate change. This is
Yeah.
also from the Paris Agreement. So, this
Yeah.
goal came through in the Paris Agreement. And there are frameworks around it where we need to be looking at impact, vulnerability, and risk assessment, planning, implementation, and then monitoring, evaluation, and learning. However, there's not a lot of specifics around it right now. So we really need to get into
Okay.
the nitty gritty to help guide countries with how to achieve this global goal for adaptation and how to create this resilience. We talk about it all the time with ENSO. We
We do,
need
yeah.
actionable items. These goals are great, but how are you going to achieve them and
Yeah.
prove it to me?
It's amazing when you actually see it's the same steps that need to be taken, just at
Mhm.
different scales.
Yeah. Just
And
slightly different scale.
and
Slightly more voices in the room too.
and like when we're making our action plans with businesses, it's whose responsibility is it and who's going to do what when, and it's really important to have that level of
Yep.
detail. So,
Yep.
on that note, what are you hoping to see? What's the when you're looking at different forums and like reading
Yeah.
up here? Is there a common theme that people are expecting to see? Or
Those kind of themes, the NDCs and the adaptation goal and the loss and damages and the climate finance, those are kind of things that experts, people kind of on the inside are expecting to be the hot topics for the delegates. However, me personally, my number one thing is I just really want to see more ambitious, actionable items and kind of an action plan and then actual implementation rather than these fancy, jargony, long reports.
yeah,
I know they're
yeah,
going to make that anyway because they have to, but I really would love to see something actionable come out of this. Last year, what was really exciting to me was that loss and damages fund,
yeah,
but we're still waiting for it to be operationalized. Like, we're really close. They did make really good progress this year, but I personally am hoping that at this COP, we get the announcement that it's operationalized or they finalize the little bits and pieces that they need to get it up and running
yeah,
because I've always been really passionate about the fact that the people that are losing their homes, their livelihoods,
yeah,
and are at the greatest risk are not the people that are always causing the problem. So having this in place is just it's completely necessary. I don't think there is any other option. Like we're so close. Like I would love to get that over the line and I would love more specifics for the global goal and adaptation. My background is in more climate adaptation because climate has already changed. Like we're already seeing new things, so we have to adapt. Obviously, we need to keep mitigating, reducing our
yeah.
emissions, things like that. Those nationally determined contributions are huge, but we cannot leave that global goal for adaptation by the wayside, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that one within these circles.
We talked about this as well previously. Some of the dangers of this is that there was so many amazing things agreed last year, and all of a sudden we're rolling into the next one. People are talking about where it is, who's involved, and actually maybe forgetting about some of the stuff that was agreed last year that we really need to make sure it gets over the line and gets done.
COP is great. It brings a lot of people together in a space, and it's becoming a little bit more accessible to more civil society, NGOs, like, there are so many people that are there. There are always protesters doing amazing demonstrations across all the key issues of climate change.
Hmm.
It's still a very closed door kind of negotiation process, but we do get updates kind of daily, so it's becoming a little bit more transparent slowly but surely. So it's a great process. It has its problems, every governmental
Yeah,
process does, but I
especially on
think
that scale.
yeah, it's impossible for it to be perfect, right?
Yeah,
So, I think it's something that is necessary, but it can't just be the focus of the year. It should be more of a celebrate what we did, what are we gonna get done in this next year, rather
yeah,
than like a, "All right, we did COP, our work is done for the year," which I think in the past it really has been that, particularly pre-Paris. And
yeah,
then in more recent years, I know myself and other kind of climate scientists and sustainability professionals and everyone have been a bit frustrated with the amount of talk versus the amount of action.
yeah,
Yeah, I think frustrated is kind of the nicest word I can use there. And there's so much potential and there's so many amazing people. And I know that a lot of the really great action doesn't come out of that delegate room. It comes out of the connections that are made between NGOs and private businesses and civil society
100%.
and the
Yeah,
protesters and everyone that's there that is just so passionate because they can actually get on the ground and do something.
get things
Um,
done. Yeah, yeah,
rather than just sitting there and talking. Obviously, the international agreements are really important. They guide what we do, but I'm more excited to see what comes out of it from the perspective of the people that are not there as delegates. Like,
Yeah.
what are these really cool organizations and companies that are there going to do?
I know you'll be keeping a very close eye on all of that, following it closely. We'll be keeping a sort of a mini blog on that as well, and we
Yeah.
will be doing another podcast, an episode on it post COP. What
Yep.
happened? What were the outcomes? Are we satisfied with it? What can we expect over the coming 12 months? So I think that I'm really looking forward to that. And thanks, Aaron. I actually have a far better understanding of this now as well, and because yeah, I think it, as I said, it whizzes around every year, and
It's
people don't fully understand exactly what
yeah,
it
and
is.
it's like a little bit of a mystery because to be honest, some of it yeah, the delegates and the parties, there's a little bit of jargon around it when in reality it is a meeting for people to talk about climate change on behalf of their countries and to negotiate for their countries' kind of interests. But then we've got the secondary version where it's all these really cool people coming together, yeah, trying to make a difference.
Like, I think on that note, trying to make a difference is a very nice way to finish it
Yep.
off, and that's what we're all trying to do here. Erin, thanks so much, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Looking forward to getting you on the next episode.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, tune into COP. There's going to be a lot of interesting things that come out of it.